My guest today is one of India's greatest musicians. In fact, he's so closely identified with his instrument that it's impossible to think of the Santoor without thinking of him. He's a man also of quiet charm and a warm, affable manner, as you'll soon get to see when I introduce you to Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma. Welcome to the program, Panditji.
Thank you.
I gather that you were barely one when your parents discovered that you could sing beautifully. How did that happen?
You see, Karan, my father, Pandit Umadat Sharma, was a vocalist of Banaras tradition. We have got different traditions of classical music in India. And as it happens in musician's house, you know, he would sing. And he used to tell me when I was hardly 1 year old. And he used to sing whatever, wherever he's singing. And someday he noticed, you know, we have got 7 notes. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni. 7 notes in all kinds of music. So basic first note, when you start singing any rag, you start with the first tonic. Sa, re, ga, ma, like this. And one day my father noticed when he was singing sa, and this kid is trying to match that sound with his voice. He noticed, oh my God, he has got this music in his veins. So that is how he felt. I must start teaching him as soon as possible. But when I was 5 years old, then my father started teaching me vocal. And side by side tabla also. That's how it started.
So in fact, before the Santoor happened, you were singing vocally and you were playing the tabla.
And that time I had no idea that one day in my life I am going to start playing an instrument which is totally unknown. And people have not even heard or seen that instrument. I had no dream of such a thing happening.
But before we
life.
come to the Santoor, because that's really what the world knows you about, the little secret I've just discovered is that you were a tabla player to start with. What made you choose the tabla?
Because my father was a vocalist as well as a tabla player. And you know, when you start teaching vocal to any student or any instrument, tabla is a very important instrument in our music because that keeps the tempo, the rhythm. And unless one has got the mastery or rhythm, it's very difficult to get that confidence in music.
So was it the sound of the tabla that attracted little Shiv as a child?
I think so, because there was something in tabla which attracted me, and gradually it so happened that I was concentrating more towards tabla and less towards vocal music. Although I was singing, I was learning both.
And in fact, you were only 10 when you did your first performance on the tabla for AIR, All India Radio.
That's right. In those days, there was no television, only radio. And they used to encourage young talent. And there used to be special programs for young children. So I was given my first, what you call, debut performance in radio at the age of 10.
Were you nervous?
I don't know why. Right from beginning, maybe I started learning very young, so I wouldn't be saying that I was nervous. It was just like a play for a child, you know. I was enjoying what I was doing.
In fact, that's a good word, play, because you were a very playful, even a willful child. There's a story that when you were 6, your father was going to Lahore and you went with him to the railway station and then you threw a big tantrum. Do you remember what happened next?
Yes, I remember. And those were the days before partition. And, you know, Lahore was one place in the country. In Jammu, we used to hear people saying, the person who has not seen Lahore has not seen anything in life, you know. You must see Lahore. So one day my father was going to perform from Radio Lahore. And we used to have those, you know, tongas, horse-drawn carriage. There were no buses or cars, and he was going to the station. I just was accompanying him just to see him off at the station. And I don't know, as a child, when I saw my father and train and all those things, I said, no, I want to go with you. And I was barefoot. And there was another person with my father. He said, no, why don't you take him? And so that was my first journey towards Lahore.
You bullied your father into taking you?
Yes.
There's more to the story, because in fact it turned out to be quite a lucky accident. He fell ill in Lahore and you nursed him back to good health.
That's right, that's right. And my father told me, look, you came here because you had to help me. There is some connection between this journey also. And he got, it was very hot day, he got sunstroke. and he was very ill, and I, as a young child, what could I do? But I was giving him water and some pills or something, you know.
So the bond between father and son was established there.
Yes, and I had a tour of Anarkali Bazaar with him and had my food there also, but in the night he got sick, you know.
Now, in fact, you were 12 when your father introduced you to the santoor. He was very keen that this should become your chosen instrument. How did you react to it when you saw it the first time?
Karan, to tell you the truth, it wasn't a favorable reaction from my side. Very interesting thing is that when you want to learn some instrument, first you get fascinated towards the sound of that instrument. You like something in that instrument and you want to learn it. That wasn't the case with me. I had heard santoor being played there, but it didn't attract me.
Not at all.
That I should leave tabla and I should start learning santoor. But my father, who was in charge of Radio Jammu as music supervisor, was transferred to Radio Srinagar, and there he found out santoor being used in Kashmiri music. And he felt, oh, this is a beautiful instrument, but it can have a wider scope if it's used in Indian classical music. And without my knowledge, for a couple of years, he was working on this instrument for the technique, how to tune a rag, how to play the sargams and all those kinds of things. And one day, when he told me, now you have to forget about other tabla or vocal or anything else, you have to concentrate on this. That was a hard choice for me. But he was my guru, he was my father. Indian tradition, classical music tradition, you have to follow your guru.
So it was duty, not love, that took you to the santoor?
In the beginning. But afterwards, it was not love at first sight. Afterwards, I developed a very close relationship with santoor.
You did your first national performance when you were only 17 in '55 in Bombay. The santoor was still nationally not a highly recognized instrument.
That's right.
Was that a high moment, or were you full of nerves and tension?
Again, something happened there. You know, I used to play tabla also. And I was young, you know, when you are young, later on you realize what I was doing at that time. I insisted to the organizer that I will play tabla as well as santoor both. He said, what are you doing? Nobody has tried two instruments consecutively at one concert. And you have been invited here to play santoor. And there are so many other leading tabla players. Why should I give you a tabla chance? You stick to your santoor. So I insisted. I said no. Again the same thing, you know, which took me to Lahore. I said no, I'll play both. He said, okay, I'll give you 30 minutes. Whether you want to play santoor or you want to play tabla. I said, okay, I'll play both within 30 minutes. And I started with tabla solo, played tabla solo for 30 minutes, then took santoor. Santoor was just sitting over there, started playing santoor for about 45 minutes and stopped. And people wanted more. I said, no, I have already exceeded the limit of time. So then they wanted, that was the reaction from a lay listener. But from the musicians, musicologists, and other people, they said, no, this instrument is not fit for playing classical music. It has got some inherent deficiencies. And unless somebody does something to modify this instrument is not suitable for
So the one problem you always faced was the resistance of those who were experts in music.
Constantly. I was always compared with other instruments. Santoor was compared with sarangi, santoor was compared with sarod, sitar. So all the time that comparison was there.
In fact, there was another sort of resistance too. In 1960, 5 years later, your father wanted you to take up a job with All India Radio in Jammu because he thought it was secure, but you were determined not to do that. In fact, you defied him, didn't you?
Yes, and I feel my father was right, because what I experienced later on. Because choosing music as a profession, even now it's very difficult to choose music as a profession and be a freelancer. In those days it was unthinkable. And my father was right that there should be some financial security. But in my mind something was wrong here. I could not think of a 9-to-5 job even if it's connected with music. So I said no. And one day he got very angry. My father was a very short-tempered person. Although I never was scolded by him during my lessons in music, because I could immediately follow what he was teaching. But that day he was very, very angry. He said, no, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a freelance musician. He said, if you want to be a freelance musician, then Jammu is no place to prove yourself. Go to such a place where leading musicians of the country are there. Prove what you can do.
So he was challenging you.
So I said, okay. I said, I'm leaving day after tomorrow. I had not thought where I'm going to. He said, where? I thought, okay, to Bombay. He said, no, wait, I don't mean that. Let me find out some place for you. Let me write to somebody, arrange something for you to stay. I said, no, you have taught me. You have given me this knowledge of music. No, this is my responsibility.
And you literally walked out of the house 2 days later?
Yes.
With how much money?
500 rupees.
That was it?
Yes.
And you headed for the big city of Bombay, which you'd never seen, except once when you did your national performance?
And not knowing anybody except one organizer.
So it was a real leap in the dark.
I did it. I don't know, that was destined.
How difficult were those days? Because you were an unknown person with an unknown instrument in a city you hardly understood.
Very, very difficult, Karan. I faced, we hear stories about people, what film people they came, and I went through a lot of hassles, and there was a time when I was living with somebody. I started from some hotel, and ironically, I landed at Bombay Central Station, and I didn't know where to go. And people come with the cars, you need a hotel. The cheapest one I selected, and we went to that hotel, and ironically, the name of the hotel was Kashmir Hotel. But it was in a very dilapidated condition, and I had to share a room with somebody else. I had to stand in the queue to go to use the loo and all that, and that's from where I started. And then I got somebody's I shared apartment with somebody, and one day, without my knowledge, that person was taking money from me as a paying guest, but not paying to the main landlord. And one day, all our things were thrown out on the footpath.
So you were literally on the pavement?
Yes, I didn't know where to go, and I also faced that kind of situations.
You actually had to sleep out rough at night?
But not luckily, I was, that day, I'm reminded of that situation. I met Pandit Ravi Shankar, and he was doing a film, Godan, and he was composing music for that, and he was using Santoor. So I thought, Panditji, there is some possibility that I might be thrown out. He said, no, you are not going to be there, and you come to my place. And I spent some time, his house was there, and then I moved out from.
Luck saved you?
Yes.
I'm told that during that period, people used to come up and keep saying to you, give up the Santoor, switch to another instrument. Were you ever tempted, given the hardship that you were facing, to say, I'll switch back to the tabla?
On the contrary, what I felt, how many times people told me, I felt some urge within that one day I must, with the blessings of my Guru, and I have to fulfill my Guru's dream, what he wanted me to do, and with double the energy I would follow. No, one day will come when these people will tell me, no, you have to play this.
So adversity made your determination stronger.
And there was another angle to that. This was one situation where what I was doing, I was not being accepted. On the other side, in the film world, I was being offered roles in the films, to act as hero, and also to compose music for films. So there was a big attraction in the glamour world.
And were you tempted to give up the Santoor for the film world?
So I think this was, I was so much focused on Santoor, and all the time my father's words were there, you have to do this. And that prompted me to go on this path.
But it must have been very difficult to resist the offers from the film world.
I think anybody with lesser involvement and lesser dedication to this thing might have left it.
Panditji, it sounds as if Bombay was a trial by fire. Let's take a break there. I want to come back in part 2 and talk about the incredible success that became yours when this trial eventually ended. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Stick with us. Welcome back. My guest is the incredible Santoor player, Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma. Panditji, we ended part 1 talking about the difficult days in Bombay and the fact that people didn't think the Santoor was a credible instrument. You actually had to change it pretty substantially, didn't you?
That's right. And the problem was, I had to find out a distinct character of this instrument. because people were always trying to compare it with sitars or other instruments. So I felt unless I give it a distinct character, people will not accept it. So in tonal quality, in tuning system, in playing technique, I did all this work, and it took me about 10-12 years. And after that, same people who had been advising me to leave this instrument and do something else, they said, "Now son, you should never leave it. Keep on doing this, because this thing is happening now on this instrument, what we were lacking earlier."
You actually won your critics around and made them people who praised you.
God was so kind.
So when did things begin to look up? After all those terrible days in Bombay, when did you start to smile again?
I think by late 60s. I went to Bombay in 60, and by end of 60s. So 10 years.
Everyone remembers something that happened in the late 60s. In 67, one of your major albums was released, Call of the Valley.
Call of the Valley.
Were you surprised by the incredible success it got?
Karan, that was a path-breaking thing in Indian classical music, because never a thematic music was tried in Indian classical music. And I had some idea, and we joined together, myself, Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia, Pandit Brijbhushan Kabra, who introduced Indian classical music on the guitar. When we did this, I had no idea that one day this is going to be one of the best, not one of the best-selling record of HMV, Indian classical music. And again, I think this was blessings of God.
Do you believe in God? You've referred 2 or 3 times to him in this interview.
I believe I'm just a medium, whatever has happened to me. Although I did my work and I worked hard and whatever, but without the blessings of God, it never nothing happens, and I'm just a medium. He is getting this thing done through me.
You actually consciously feel that?
I feel that.
And so when you play well, or when you compose, or when you venture into something new, in a sense you see yourself as the medium of God?
I definitely, honestly believe in that.
Because one of the things that you've done a lot of, particularly in the last 20 years, is films. You resisted it when you went to Bombay first, and it must have been very difficult to resist it when you were so poor. But increasingly with Silsila, you and Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia have become a team. What took you back to films?
I was very deeply interested in film music, in composition particularly, but I had to hold myself back. And when Santoor was all over the world, not only in India, by late 70s, so I thought now it's the right time to do something which I wanted to do. And Yash Chopra offered film Silsila, so that was the beginning of film music direction.
People say that Silsila is probably the best music you've ever done. Would you agree with them?
I also feel Silsila music was something which happens once in a lifetime.
A touch of God?
I think so.
Do you have a favorite song from Silsila?
Karan, I tried to bring some folklores of Jammu in film music, Dogri folklore. And there was one song which was inspired by such a folk song, Dekha Ek Khwaab To Ye Silsile Hue. It's in Pahadi. Rag Pahadi has been developed from the folk melodies. Dekha ek khwab to ye silsile hue, दूर तक निगाह में हैं गुल खिले हुए, ये गिला है आपकी निगाहों से, फूल भी हो दरमियां तो फासले हुए, देखा एक ख्वाब तो ये सिलसिले हुए, दूर तक निगाह में हैं गुल खिले हुए.
It's amazing. I've listening to you sing Silsila. I recall that all the music that you've done seems to have been for Yash Chopra films. Lamhe, Chandni, Dar, they're all Yash Chopra films.
That's
Is that a
right.
coincidence or a deliberate decision?
I think it was kind of deliberate, or it had to be like this, because we were mainly classical musicians. We are still classical musicians, and main focus is towards classical music, and we could do film music only when we were not doing our concerts. And Yashji was planning his films according to our availability. That was the main reason that we did Yash Chopra films.
So other music producers have to learn.
They would ask us other times when we were doing our concert season and we were traveling abroad to do films at that time, which wasn't possible.
Now in 1966 you got married to your wife Manorma.
That's right.
Was that an arranged marriage?
Arranged marriage. And we saw first time both of us face to face, and you know, in smaller towns how it happens. and we were not alone. We were surrounded by 10 more people, and we were taken to a movie, and the film was Mahabharat. And we were sitting I was sitting here and 2-3 people, and then she was sitting there. And during the intermission, we just have exchange of glances, and that's it. And we had to decide whether you like the girl or she likes me or not.
There and then?
Yes. Afterwards, we told our parents, but they had already made their decision. So it was arranged marriage.
Did you find it easy to live with a husband who, unlike others, never went to office?
I think it was very hard on her, because she was not coming from a musician's family, she was coming from a business family. And she was used to seeing her parents and brothers and other people going for work in the morning and coming in the evening. Here he saw her husband sitting at home day after day after day, not going to work, and getting ready and doing nothing and just playing his instrument. So this was very frustrating, because no money was coming, and she had to adapt herself to the situation. And she did it marvelously, I think.
How much of a source of strength has she been?
I think great source, because unless she was behind me to support me, I would have wavered. So she looked after I still know, I don't know what's happening in my family, from where things are coming and how she is managing it.
She literally runs your life.
I am just left to my music, and that is how I think music can be done.
Panditji, looking back on your life, you've achieved practically everything your father wanted you to. You've made the Santoor as established as the sitar or the sarod, and you have a son who's about to follow in your footsteps. If your father could see what you've achieved, what do you think he would say?
I think this was my father's dream to establish Santoor, and now Rahul has taken this, and this has gone to the 3rd generation. I feel he's still there, up over there and looking, and very happy and satisfied with this. And if he had been in flesh and blood and being here, this would have been the best moment of his life.
And when Rahul told you that he wanted to become a Santoor player, was that a moment of enormous pride, or did you suddenly say to yourself, is he making a mistake, should he think again?
No, I didn't think so, but my wife was thinking. She had faced so much difficulties in her life. She didn't want another musician in the family.
One husband playing music
enough. But Rahul didn't want to do anything else. He was into music, and he basically, I think Rahul is a born composer. He started composing at a very young age, and he was assisting me also when I was doing Chandni and Lame and Dar. But then he started Santoor, and he was focused on Santoor, and now he's doing both. He's composing music for Yash Chopra's next film, Mujhse Dosti Karoge, which has got...
So he's following in your footsteps all the way.
So, God willing.
Panditji, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.